This is the multiple award-winning GardenDC podcast, the podcast about everything gardening in the Mid-Atlantic region and beyond. I'm your host, Kathy Jentz. I'm the editor of Washington Gardener magazine. Our content is aimed at gardening enthusiasts, people who grow everything, from edibles to ornamentals, natives to exotics. If it grows in our area, that's what we talk about. Welcome to episode 286 of the GardenDC podcast. In this episode, we talk with horticulturist Christine Froelich about growing edible plants in containers. The plant profile is on Dutsia, and we share what's going on in the garden as well as some upcoming local gardening events in the What's New segment. We close out with the last word on Help Hydrangea from Christy Page of Green Prints. I have a small favor to ask for our loyal listeners. Stay tuned to the end of the episode for that. This episode, we're joined by Christine Froelich, horticulturist, landscape designer, garden writer, and speaker. Welcome, Christine.
Hi, Kathy. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you on. And we're friends through the Garden Communicators Association GardenCom, but this is your first time on the GardenDC podcast. We're going to be talking all about growing food in containers. But before that, Christine, we want to know a little bit about you. And were you born with chlorophyll in your veins and a green thumb?
Well, not exactly. My grandmother was a wonderful gardener. I don't know that she really taught me anything, but I spent my childhood playing in her garden, so it probably rubbed off. It's sort of interesting. I got to thinking about how I got started in gardening. Actually, it was through containers, houseplants specifically. I was living in Richmond, Virginia, and going to school and working at a very boring part-time job, and I couldn't seem to keep jobs. And I had this little room that I had plants in. It was my first time, keeping house plants, and I got very enamored of that. And then I started riding my bike through Maymont Park every morning, and I thought to myself, I really like plants, and I'd be happier if I worked outside. Maybe I'll apply for a job here. And so I did, and it took me a while to get hired, but then I did get hired, and that was my first job in the horticultural field. And I don't know that I did a lot with pots until somewhere around 10 years ago, but now I'm completely enamored of them. And sometimes I think, well, when I get to be a little old lady and I can't garden outside anymore, I'll just revert to pots. So, yeah, it's been a long and windy road through doing garden maintenance in public and private gardens and design and a lot of consultations. So that's my story.
And you're doing garden writing and speaking, of course, landscape design. And tell the listeners where you're located now. I think being able to bike over to Maymont, what a dream
to
be able
nice.
to do that. Yeah, and if anybody's familiar with the Richmond, Virginia area, Maymont is a wonderful public garden, and you should not miss it when you're there. Tell listeners where you're located now and what you garden and maybe a little bit about your gardening climate.
Okay. Well, I now live in upstate New York, specifically Sodas Point, which is probably, about an hour east of Rochester, and it's right on the lake. So that's always challenging. And I guess I'm probably zone 5, 6, depending on which side of the house I'm gardening on. I'm like about 100 feet from Lake Ontario, so I get all the cold winds off the lake in the spring and the warmer winds in the fall. So it's quite different than gardening in the south, which is a whole different zone. And I feel lucky that I've had to have a chance to garden in so many different zones, but sometimes it can be disappointing.
And so being in the Rochester area, that has a great garden history in America, especially for all the mail order catalog companies and seed companies that used to be based there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's still a very lively gardening community.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's the home of Ellwanger and Barry and, Highland Park and, just so many other things where I've spent a good bit of time, but I am somewhat removed from that. I live in a little beach community. And really, most people that live here have second homes, and so they don't have gardens. So I'm a little bit unusual in that way.
And is it sandy soil, clay soil? I'm imagining it would be sandy or rocky.
God, it's awful. It's sandy with little pebbles underneath as you dig down.
One good reason to be in containers then.
Oh my gosh, yes, yes. It's an ever going battle around here with the wind from the lake and the horrible soil.
And what are your favorite things to grow in containers aside from edibles?
Well, I'm rather passionate about containers. Years ago, I mean, the first article I ever wrote in my gardening career was one for Fine Gardening about growing perennials in containers. And back then, no one was doing it. So I do like growing perennials in containers, but now I'm really into growing shrubs in containers and sometimes small trees and anything that I'm dying to have that I'm sure I'll kill if I put it in the ground. I use containers as like my experimental place to have fun in. And it's a good way to grow your garden. It's a great way to find out what plants are going to do. And sometimes I end up with a lot of extras that I have to give away, but it's really fun, and it's a great way to add height to your garden, entertainment, texture, all these things that maybe I wouldn't be able to have if I put them in the ground.
Very true. And I think containers feels like you can always add one more. Although my driveway is no longer a driveway, it's a container zoo, I'm going to call it. Sometimes I call it the pot ghetto because it's where everything that hasn't been planted in the garden is still in its pots, but also my containers that are deliberately, potted up are mixed in there too.
Oh, absolutely. I have a pot ghetto too. It's next to the vegetable garden near my house, and it's where I stash things that I don't know what to do with, but I might need them later. And it's a very handy thing to have. Everybody should have one.
Mm-hmm. And I was thinking the other day about one additional reason that we don't talk about too much of why container edibles are preferable in some cases, aside from soil conditions and other things that we usually talk about, is the bunnies. So in my community garden plot, I still use containers because I can separate things that the rabbits might chew on, especially the baby rabbits, and put those in the containers up higher than what they would be able to get into.
Good idea. I struggle with bunnies and deer.
And if you don't have deer fencing, you can usually put some type of netting or something around a pot to protect it. But yeah, the height is not going to help for the deer.
No, but
No.
I will say it's a whole lot easier to net the pots than it is the whole garden.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I just put all the pots in a safe place if they're being particularly naughty. And this year they are.
Yeah, and that does bring up grouping your containers for many reasons. Just like you were saying, it's easier to net a group. It's easier to water a group put together like with like. And I think it just looks better. I would think with your designer eye, being able to group not, a row of soldiers all the same height, right? But maybe some different textures, blending different sizes, always is pleasing to the eye.
Oh, absolutely. I'm really big on grouping things together. It does look better, easier to take care of, and gives you a lot more bang for your buck.
And I would think, the rule of three or having it in odd numbers, always more pleasing than pairs. And I was just thinking about when something doesn't look good, right, or is out of season, you just push that container to the back. That's a lot easier said than in the ground, right? You just can't push that shrub or whatever it is to the back while you're waiting for it to come back into bloom again.
Yes, absolutely.
So we were both interviewed recently by Martha Stewart Living online about tips for growing vegetables in containers. So everybody can check out that article at marthastewart.com. And I'm just looking up the title if they want to find out more. It was 12 vegetables that thrive in containers. And first, let's talk about
growing food in container basics. So we talked a little bit about grouping containers, but what type of container materials do you like, Christine?
I have strong feelings about that. I really don't like terracotta. It dries out too fast, even though I like the way it looks. And the cloth grow bags, for me, they have caused me to have to water way more than I would like. I really prefer the lightweight fiberglass, ceramic that's glazed. And I really like wood containers. My husband made me some out of pressure-treated wood that have worked well for me. And metal isn't bad either. Mostly, though, I think you got to make sure they're big enough. That's kind of one of my things. How about you, Kathy? What do you like?
I agree. Go bigger than you think. Like that is your first thing. I would say go for 3 larger containers rather than say 8 or 10 small ones. So 24-inch, 36-inch, 30-inch diameter, ideal. And for materials, for us here in the Mid-Atlantic, if you're on a very humid environment, you could do the grow bags. Just make sure you have good drainage, like they're up on pot feet or a little board or something, just so they're not sitting flat on, like, say, a driveway surface or a patio, because they can tend to just have mold and rot in the bottom. And I would also say terracotta sparingly. I agree with you, Christine. It dries out so fast. But if you have something like a Mediterranean herb, so like rosemary or lavender, then you're creating a Mediterranean environment in that terracotta pot. But everything else, yeah, I would not put a tomato in a terracotta pot. That would just be asking for daily, if not twice daily watering. Yeah, and misery. And it does look good. But if you're going to use terracotta, I always tell people you can make it a plastic pot by lining it with latex paint and painting latex paint on the outside. So latex is plastic. So you're basically stopping it from having that moisture wicking out of it by lining it. But I agree with you on the like the extruded plastics, the lightweight large ones. They're not as easy to find anymore. I think at garden centers, which is a shame. I think one company out of Mexico was making them for a while, but if you can get your hands on them, well, especially the double wall with some type of air pocket in between. Like when you knock on the side, if it's straight, it's fine. But I find that little reservoir of air helps a lot. What about you, Christine?
Oh, yeah, I agree totally. And Kathy, I have a question about the grow bags. It struck me that maybe my unhappiness with them is that I'm not using big enough grow bags. And I'm just wondering, what size do you use?
Yeah, that's very true, Christine. If you're using like the little 8-inch, 10-inch ones, those are more meant for like hanging off, like put one little impatient plant, one little, annual vinca or some type of annual flower in it and hanging it off the side of a fence or something. For vegetables, I would use at least 5-gallon size, at least. And then same as you would for when we're talking larger containers. I also use a potato grow bag that kind of has, like, I forgot what they're called, but those old fashioned underwears where you have the little 2 buttons in the back.
Oh,
so
yeah.
you didn't the long john that you see like the old prospectors wear in like silent movie. I'm sure there's a term for those. That's what my potatoes grow bag has. So it has like a Velcro on one side and you just pull down the side and you can reach in and harvest a couple potatoes, and then you could zip it back up. And then
I want some of them. Where did you find those?
So different companies have them. You could make your own. So if you bought a cloth grow bag, you could always cut that hole and then put 2 snaps or 2 buttons, make it, really old fashioned looking or 2 Velcro strips. So you could always, of course, make your own, but several companies sell them and they are convenient and they're pretty sturdy. I've had the same one, I think, for over 5 years now. So most grow bags, you could use them for 2, 3, 4 years before you might want to compost them, because they are usually compostable materials. But that one is convenient. And when we talk later on about some of the unusual edibles, remind me to talk about an unusual edible I grew in that potato bag, Christine.
Oh, okay.
So let's talk about where we put our containers. So same place we're going to grow our regular vegetables, right, Christine? I'm looking at full sun, south side, but you're facing the lake. What side of your house faces that lake?
Well, the side of the house faces the north, and the other side faces the south. So that's good. So the south is a great place to put containers, and I do it a lot, and sometimes the east. However, I think proximity is really important with vegetables. I used to have this house that was on a 5-acre plot of land in the vegetable garden. It took like 5 minutes to walk to, and none of the kids would ever go there and harvest anything. And even me, I'd be like, God, the lettuce is all the way down there. So when I moved here, I thought, I'm going to have like lettuces and herbs and things like that close to the house. So I actually plant them on the north side of the house. I have a fence, and I do have enough light there for them, but they're closer, and so I can use them easily from the kitchen. And I think that's important. But certainly light is everything. I mean, vegetables need at least 6 hours of sun, so you got to make sure they've got that. And yeah, and also I just have to say, because I live on the lake, I've got to be really careful of the wind. And I would think anywhere where you've got wind, you got to give that some thought, because I have days in the summer where the wind, even if I water, can dry out the foliage so badly that the plant will really take a hit.
Yeah, I think that same concern for people who are on elevated balcony, rooftop gardens. The wind could just, wick all that moisture out of there.
Yeah.
So any tips for having extra moisture in your containers or just maintaining them?
Well, I have gardened on balconies for other people, and I try to keep the pots closer to the building rather than out looking over it. I mean, I know that sounds good and you want things dangling off the side, but that can be a little problematic. Certainly, keeping them in soil that retains moisture a little bit more would help. I haven't tried this, but I've thought about doing it at my house when it's really hot. Like, I've thought about maybe keeping a little remed around, or some kind of covering. So on days when it's really windy, maybe I could just cover them a little bit to keep them from getting so windblown. Because honestly, here I've had the foliage turn brown on days like that.
Yeah, I would think, cover cloth, the remed fabric is a good idea. Maybe it's soil moist pellets if it doesn't come with the potting mix that you're using, you could add some soil moist, and that could hold some moisture at the root level of the plants too.
Have you used those, Kathy?
I've used them, especially in hanging containers for me, because those tend to dry out really quick.
Mm-hmm.
So anything hanging like strawberries or anything else like that, I haven't had to so much in containers that are on the ground, but I'm not doing it in a super windy or elevated place. But if I was, I would definitely have no hesitation using the soil moist pellets.
I'm going to have to try them again. I used them very unsuccessfully. Maybe I didn't follow the directions quite right, but my containers looked like somebody threw up all over them,
Oh, no. Yeah.
Pellets started exploding and coming over the side. It was very embarrassing.
No, yeah, definitely read the instructions. A little bit goes a long way. And whenever I give my container talks, Christine, I always hold up a little tiny, like, quarter teaspoon measuring spoon. That's how much you want to use per container. And you want to get down and use like a chopstick and push it in and get down at the root zone. Because if you put a little too many soil moist pellets in there, they will bubble up and it'll look like, a bunch of jellyfish on the surface or coming over your pots.
I know, it's like a science fiction movie.
Yeah, you can definitely overuse them easily, but a little bit goes a long way. It's much more economical that way. And then, of course, there are potting mixes that already have soil moist pellets in, but they're very conservative in the amount that they use. And when you were talking about containers, having them close to where you're going to be preparing your meals, the same theory as a kitchen garden right outside your kitchen door. I think that is such a great tip, Christine, because who wants to slog all the way back, up to, 100 yards away? If that's your only choice for the sun, that might be your only choice, right? But if you can find any place closer that's full sun, that's as close to whatever entrance and exit you're using all the time, that's your best place to put your containers.
Yep, absolutely.
And so, Do you ever mix ornamentals in with your edible containers?
Oh, I always do. Maybe it's the garden designer part of me, but I like things to look good. I don't like just plain old vegetables all by themselves. They look kind of lonely to me. I love mixing them with herbs, especially like, those that are like colored like sages that are like golden or purple. I love purple basil. I'm really crazy about the French marigolds, which are smaller and compact and bushy, and they have that nice texture. And, nasturtiums, which I kind of like them. I can't say enough about mixing them, because then, here's the thing, it's like sometimes the vegetables don't always look that great after they've done their thing. And then you've got something else outside of the pot, like doing its thing and looking really pretty and kind of bumps it up and makes it more attractive. And plus it's useful, especially if you use herbs, and there's so many, like borage and fennel and dill and lavender and golden thymes and, lemongrass. I could go on and on. You can just have a field day with them.
And yeah, I always say tomatoes are one of our ugliest garden plants, especially when they get, a late blight or something and the lower leaves fall off. Having some marigolds underneath is a great idea.
Yes, and they're supposed to be companion plants, and they look good for a really long time. So even after the tomato has bit the dust, you'll probably have the marigolds until freezing, and they
Yep. And I just bought a tricolor sage from my garden club's annual fundraiser plant sale, and I'm in love with it, Christine. I think it's one of the most beautiful plants, and I'm like, I don't even care if it's a herb or not. It's just a gorgeous plant. And yeah, when you're saying some of the lime color chartreuse herbs that they have now, those are great choices. And lemongrass is something I use as a thriller in my ornamental containers all the time. And, occasionally I might snip a leaf to use for a tea or something, but I'm really growing it for the looks.
Yeah. Another thing that I like to do about, when you're mixing pots together, if you can't fit flowers or herbs into the pot where you're putting the container, like why not just have a container that has like herbs or flowers in it and stick it among it? And like there's one plant that I think everyone should have. It's pineapple sage, Salvia elegans, golden delicious. It's like 4 or 5 feet tall, and it gets these fabulous like red flowers on it in the fall. Oh my God, it's so incredible. Hummingbirds just love it. It's so much fun. So, I just think like having all of those things together just makes vegetable gardening more fun than you can possibly think.
Absolutely.
GardenDC will be back after this short break.
Get low-maintenance alternatives to lawns with Ground Cover Revolution by Kathy Jentz. Reducing the lawn is among the biggest trends in homeownership, with an endless stream of homeowners looking for an eco-friendly alternative to a traditional turfgrass lawn. In the last few years alone, over 23 million Americans converted part of the lawn to a natural landscape, and now they're looking to do even more. The biggest challenge to adopting this new ideal of the perfect lawn? Knowing how and when to replace your turf and which plants are the best ones for the job. Ground Cover Revolution is here with all the answers you need, and some you didn't even know you needed. Included are 40 in-depth profiles of plants that are perfect choices for replacing a grass lawn. There are options for sun, for shade, for dry and wet sites, and for various climates around the globe. There are choices that bloom, options that are evergreen, and selections that are deer-resistant. Kathy Jentz has also included an incredibly useful chart that gives you all the specifics on each of the 40 choices for quick reference and to make your ground cover selection process even easier. Whether you want to replace the entire lawn or just reduce the amount of land dedicated to turf, Ground Cover Revolution will help you usher in a new and improved idea of what a beautiful lawn should be. Ground Cover Revolution is available now wherever you buy books, including Amazon.com and Bookshop.org.
Blowing ad budget on metrics that look great till the CFO sees them. That's bull spend. And marketers are calling it out in Dashboard Confessions.
I remember telling my boss, it'll be good for the brand, when leads were slow. Yeah, it wasn't.
Cut the bull spend. LinkedIn lets you target by company, job title, and more. Advertise on LinkedIn. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a $250 credit. Go to linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
talk about some of the fun categories of food we grow in containers. We'll start off with the nightshades, and that's our tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, and potatoes. And of that group, Christine, I struggle with eggplants and I do best with peppers. How about you?
Well, Kathy, you're lucky. You're in a hotter climate than me. I'm in a hit or miss climate. I mean, we can have summers that are hot as all get out, or we can have a summer that doesn't start until July. And eggplants like it hot. And so I struggle with eggplant too because of that. If we have a nice hot summer and not too much rain, good. But otherwise, they kind of piddle out. I have had better luck with the small ones, the dwarf ones. And eggplant is something that I definitely fill in around the pot with something cute, like the marigolds and the nasturtiums, because I know I'm not going to be able to necessarily count on it. I have noticed that the closer to the house I keep it, I have a white house, and so the light reflects off of it. That seems to help. Of course,
that's a good tip.
Yeah, I haven't given up, so I'll probably try it again this year.
Yeah, for me, it's the flea beetles on the eggplants. So if I don't have a cover cloth on them, 24/7, they just get eaten alive and skeletonized. And talk about an unpretty vegetable. And then you brought up the smaller sized eggplants, so that does lend us to things like fairy tale is a good variety. Some of the other smaller ones. There are edible, I would say, miniature vegetables that are specifically bred for patio and container growing. And sometimes you'll see them on seed packs. It'll say patio container or edible container, or it'll just sometimes they'll say urban series. They'll use the term urban, but what you're looking for in container vegetables usually is the determinate varieties. The bush type usually do better than vining. So a bush type of bean or a bush type of tomato rather than vining, or indeterminate, as they call it. And then I also look for anything that says miniature, small, container sized in almost all the vegetables I'm growing.
Yeah.
Are there any particular varieties, especially like tomatoes, that you like in containers, Christine?
Oh, you would ask that. No, nothing comes to mind. I mean, I just usually buy something that's a dwarf that says it's going to do well. I mean, I really like the sweet 100, but, they get too viney, so I keep them in the garden.
Although they're so prolific, and you could just give a whole container to them and just let them go to town.
And like one thing that I sometimes do, like I have this little small garden right in my patio area, and it's near the kitchen. And so sometimes things like that, I'll stick it in a pot and I'll grow it up the fence. So, if you have a place where you could stick it in a pot and grow it up a fence or trellis, that would work.
Yeah, so if you have a balcony with a railing or some type of thing that you can zip tie some type of trellis or stake to it, I've seen people use that. And there are some varieties of tomatoes that can go to 20 feet vining.
Yeah.
And you could train them around if you want to. I mean, the wind could snap it. That's the other part is sometimes when you're doing trellising and containers on a rooftop or balcony, you're risking that the wind would whip back and forth. So I use like a tie that usually has a little give to it. Like, we're dating ourselves, Christine, and it would say the old knee-high pantyhose that you're not wearing anymore. Those make great ties for something like that because they give a little bit without, rubbing against the stem of the tomato and then snapping it. And what type of ties do you like to use, Christine?
Well, I usually just use twine, garden twine. For a while, I was using those like cushiony things, the plasticky things that have wire underneath. I can't think of the name of them. I mean,
they're kind of like a twist tie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are handy for tomatoes. A little on the pricey side. I tend to lose things like that, so I guess mostly I just revert to the twine. Sits in my pocket all the time.
Yeah. I totally feel you on the losing things in the garden because every nice tomato tie system I've had or been given to trial or purchased, somehow at the end of the season you lose them and you might have one, like you had started off with 5 or 10. So totally with that. But,
Yeah.
and then my hesitation with twine myself is squirrels.
Oh, really?
I don't know why they love to chew anything that's a twine. They won't touch the tomato, but they love to chew on the twine. And
Wow.
so, yeah, if I use those old cut up knee highs, they don't tend to chew on those nylons. But something about, maybe my twine tastes like sugar. I don't know.
Well, you know something? I've got a whole drawer full of old pantyhose that my daughter forbids me to wear. I guess they're not cool anymore. I didn't know that. So now I know what to do with them.
Yep. So new life for those old pantyhose.
Yeah.
So our next category for growing in containers are squashes and melons, and I guess we can lump cucumbers in with that.
Well, cucumbers, I think, are fun to trellises. I don't know about squashes and melons. I really am fond of those little short cucumbers. I don't know what is one, Thumbelina or something like that. I can't think of the names right now. But I like trellising them. They're fun. I think squashes and, other vining plants like watermelon and, geez, why am I not thinking of the other name? Melons. Gosh, I think those are a little more difficult. At least for me, they are. They get gangly when I try to grow them up a trellis.
Yeah, I think this is where you especially want to look for those container-sized ones.
Yeah.
So I've been growing the elevator zucchini for the past couple years on a trellis, and that one, they can still get big if you don't pick them when they're small. They can still get big and take down your trellis, but you want to watch them. And I think some of the smaller sized melons, some of the antique and personal size heirloom variety ones are good choices. I agree with you on the smaller cucumbers, like the ones that can go for pickling, but also for eating. So then they could do double duty. And have you ever grown the mouse melon, the cucamelon, Christine?
I did try that. I didn't really like it that much, but I don't know. Then again, I have to say that I don't have as long of a growing season as you do, Kathy. Melons really are not so dependable here.
Yeah, and those are, they're also known as Mexican gherkin for a reason, because they want really hot, really long summers. They are prolific, and they will take over if you let them. But the good thing about them is they look like tiny mouse watermelons, so they are small, and they don't have the weight of some of the others, like the larger pickles and cucumbers. But I would just say pick them young, pick them early, all those melons and squashes and cucumbers. And some people I see will use, again, that old pair of pantyhose to kind of tie them up, and if they're starting to pull the whole vine down.
Yeah. My biggest problem with squashes and melons and even cucumbers is the beetles, the squash beetles. This year, I think I'm going to just drape Rime over them. It's gotten that bad. I've tried everything. I've tried planting them early. I've tried planting them late. I've picked them off, but I always get them. How about you?
Yeah, same. In our community garden, they're a really bad problem. So I use like a little metal cage as the squash seedlings are emerging, and just around the base. Like, it doesn't have to be the whole vine, because I find where they like to make their slit in the vine is right near the growing point, right? So I've seen people wrap it in aluminum foil for the first 10 or 12 inches, but a cover cloth would work, like a tight metal cage, a basket, anything that can keep them out of that, like, kind of, I would call it the crown of the plant, or where it's emerging from the ground, because otherwise you come one day, perfectly gorgeous squash plant, right? And then the next day, just dead. It's so disheartening. Yeah, it's awful. The squash vine borer can really turn you off growing squash, which would be a shame.
It can totally make you swear.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I've seen people do kind of triage surgery too, and like you slit it with a knife, you pull it out.
Yeah.
I don't think it works that great.
No.
I would just say later planting also works, like you were talking about, kind of varying it, but you're still vulnerable to it. So as much as you can get them to not have access to that base of the plant, that helps a lot. And
that's a good idea.
I was going to say for cucumbers, squashes, and melons also, they will overflow the pot and take over. So they're not the best for companion planting.
Yeah, yeah.
So unless you really are on top of them and tying them up and getting the foliage, and I've seen people prune out the lower foliage,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm greedy.
Yeah.
I want that chlorophyll. And
Yeah,
so when you
yeah.
take away the leaves, you're taking away the chlorophyll and not having as big of a crop. But it is one way to keep it smaller, is to
Mm-hmm.
kind of chop back some of that foliage.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's move to some of our vining plants, since we're already talking about tying things up, and those would be our peas and beans. And peas for us, cool season, and then we talked about determinate and indeterminate. So of
Mm-hmm.
course you want the bush variety of beans, but in peas, I think they just say dwarf pea. They don't usually
Yeah, they
say,
still vine.
yeah, they still vine, but there's a shorter vine.
Well, I want to just say something about supports.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, they're going to need supports, and it's helpful to stick them in the pot as you seed. But I also discovered last year, when all of my peas came tumbling down, that you've really got to make sure you use heavy-duty enough stakes so that when the plant matures, it doesn't start collapsing, because that's what happened to me. And even though it doesn't look like that's going to happen when they're little, when they get bigger, they get kind of heavy.
So what do you recommend, like metal stakes?
You know what? I used bamboo, and I think bamboo would have been fine, but I think I should have used thicker bamboo stakes, like the kind that you can't like prune with your pruning shears, the heavy duty ones. I think that would have worked better. And also, I think I should have pushed them to the bottom of the container instead of just like putting them halfway in.
That's, yeah, I find that too, that when you were saying putting them in right when you put the pea seeds in, push them as far down as possible, because it can also be something that gets caught in the wind, takes the whole pot over, and nobody wants a spilled pot. That's never fun.
Yeah, I almost think the way to do it would have been to, as I was filling up the container, get the supports that I'm going to use and put them in the container, and then fill in the soil around it and just mash it down real good.
Yep. And maybe some type of weight in the bottom, and maybe even attach the trellis to that weight.
Yeah.
So it could be like half a brick or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Just so it doesn't block the drainage holes, of course.
Yeah.
And I just love a good sugar snap or snow pea. I love the edible pod varieties. How about you, Christine?
Oh, they're my favorite. You know what? Last year I made the mistake of planting the kind you have to shell. I mean, come on. Who wants to shell peas? I'm just over that. I was so disappointed. I was like, what were you thinking? So this year I have the edible pods, and I'm much happier. At least I will be if they ever germinate, because it's been so damn cold up here.
Yeah, that's the other thing, is waiting for those to germinate. And I was going to say that we don't have to wait too long on the greens. So let's talk about them. I think that's the one I would recommend most to beginners. If you've never grown any food in a container before, to start either salad greens, Swiss chard, another great choice.
Pretty.
Other edible greens that you recommend, Christine?
Well, spinach, because I never have luck with spinach in the ground.
Yeah, I think that's a great choice.
Salad greens, I mean, they're so much fun. And then the thing is salad doesn't last forever, so you can just like keep in your little stash of plants, you can just keep them coming, and then replace them. I don't know, I have this little trick that I use. I have containers that look nice, because I don't want to see black plastic, like messing up the patio or anything. But like I insert them, back into the pot. And so when I do like salad greens, like I seed them every 2 weeks. And then when they start looking kind of beat in the nice container, I just lift them out and I put a new one in.
That's a great way to do succession planting in containers. So you can just switch them out like that.
And they're not deeply rooted, so you can do that. And spinach, that doesn't last forever either. You got to have something to take its place.
And you can even do a more shallow containers with the salad greens. That's another reason I recommend them for beginners, because you can use a hanging pot. It can be, because you said they're shallow rooted. So there's like those special salad tables that people make, which is just a shallow elevated raised bed. So those work well. They only need about, I would say, 4 to 6 inches of soil at the most for depth. old window boxes,
Yep.
great place for salad greens and spinach. Swiss chard could go into the warm season, so that's why I like Swiss chard a lot, because you can have it in a hot summer and still be cutting from it. And
it's so pretty, like the
yeah.
rainbow variety. Love them.
And a lot of salad greens are gorgeous. Like we
are.
Just grew some deer tongue lettuce. I was like, this is a shame to even cut it. And we were talking about mixing ornamentals and edibles, or like some people will call it edimental gardening or foodscaping. I think salad greens are a great choice as long as you can keep it away from, we talked about earlier, the bunnies and the deer.
Yeah, the bunnies and the deer, they like them a lot.
Has anybody ever asked you, Christine, about growing garlic in containers?
I haven't had anybody ask me about that, but
I get asked that a lot.
Do you? Well, I mean, it takes so long. Why would you want garlic in a container unless you were hiding it somewhere?
Yes, and I think because it's pretty much a 9-month crop, like October to June, it's taking up a lot of real estate. They're very root hungry. They hate root disturbance. They are not a good choice, unfortunately, for container growing. And, your return on investment, right? Your bang for your buck is just extremely low, and you're never going to get those big, healthy garlic bulbs that you get in the ground. But what are some good chive or onion choices?
Yeah, I mean, chives. I love chives. They're perfect. I mean, they get those pretty little flowers on them, and then you whack them back and then come back, and they're pretty, and they smell kind of nice and oniony if you like that smell, and I kind of do. But I don't know. That's the only one I would grow. I mean, onions, like, again, I mean, it just seems like, how much are you going to get out of it?
Yeah, very little. Unless it is your only choice and you have the space to devote in a container for it, I would bypass the onion family, aside from, like you said, chives, because they're quick to sprout, they're pretty, every part of them is edible.
Well, one thing you could do if you wanted to grow onions and you wanted to jazz it up a little bit, if you had like a long container, like a window box kind of a container, and you threw in the onions in the middle, and then you planted around them with like some of the marigolds or, little dwarf zinnias or something really cute to make it look entertaining until it did anything. That might be fun.
Yeah, I think those would be really cute. And also you can mix in some of the ornamental alliums as well.
Yeah. Oh, that would be fun. Yeah, totally.
When I think chives, I think about herbs, which we touched on many of them before. So Mediterranean herbs, great choices. And some of those beautiful herbs, like you were talking about, the purple basils. I love Thai basil because it has like the purple base to it and pretty flowers. Pollinators love it. So if I wasn't going to grow any other edible in a container, just a container of herbs on your front steps, I think that's an investment that keeps on giving.
Totally. And, you could even, if you wanted to even overwinter some of them in a pot, like the perennial ones, like the salvias and, the marjorams and the oreganos and the thymes. I mean, that would be a blast, I think. I mean, you can have like a whole really colorful garden just with herbs.
Yeah, I've seen people do a really nice job like stacking cinder blocks at different levels and just do 3 rows of herbs in containers. So each herb gets its own pot, or you can combine like with like. A lot of herbs, of course, Christine, don't play well with others.
Well,
and I'm thinking of the mint family, of course.
Yeah, mint has to have its own pot.
Yep. Lemon balm is in the mint family. Yep. Anything with that square stem, that's already telling on itself.
Yeah, don't even put it on the ground in a container. It'll escape.
No, keep it on one of those elevated cinder blocks I was talking about, because it will come out the bottom.
Yes.
And same thing with the lemon balm. All those mint family things love to escape their pots if you don't keep a close eye on them.
Yes, they're very naughty.
But I've been trying some different mints lately, Christine. Like there's orange mint, strawberry mint. There's a Kentucky mint, spearmint for making your juleps. So don't give up on mints just because they're bad behaviors.
Oh, no, I love mint. I did banish them for a while, and then I missed them.
Yes. Then you're like, oh, I want them back.
Like, what was I thinking, Like, I was brought up in the South. I'm a Virginia girl. What the heck?
Let's talk about some exotics and others. that we've grown in containers. And I did promise to say what else I grew in that potato bag with the little flap on the side.
Okay.
So one year I did peanuts. So you were talking about growing up in the South. It reminded me of, I was like, okay, I got to try peanuts once. And I did it in the ground. Not that great, right? But they loved that potato grow bag. I got a great harvest out of them. And at the end of the season, I just dumped out the entire grow bag into a wheelbarrow and was able to take all the peanuts out and then cure them. So I was like, this is much better than growing them in the soil, in my opinion.
Wow. Peanuts. Well, I doubt I can grow peanuts here, but more power to you in the South. You could probably grow sweet potatoes.
Yes,
sweet potatoes in containers. Sweet potatoes.
And that's a great choice, but it is one of those, again, like this goes, I think, with the squash and the melons, where the foliage will take over the world if you let it.
Yeah.
There are some new varieties of sweet potatoes that are both ornamental and edible tubers. So you have the pretty leaves, and you could eat the leaves, of course. But yeah, look out for some of those they're both. Mm-hmm. They're bred for both, because in the past they were either bred for looks, to have those great vining sweet potatoes like Blackie and Marguerite for your annual containers, but they didn't make a good tuber. And then, or it made a great big tuber, but it was just the plain green leaf. So there's some new ones on the market for that. And I was thinking about some tall things that you could grow in containers, like okra and corn. Corn is wind pollinated, so it's a little tough to have enough, right? You might need to have one of those big, what are those called, like farmer's troughs, the big old horse tank trough. Then you might have enough space to have corn.
Yeah. One year I tried to grow artichokes, and another year I tried to grow cardoons. Well, they grew okay. They didn't really do that much. And again, you'd probably have better luck than me, because you're a zone higher than me.
Yeah. Even then, it takes a long, long season. And if you get an early frost here in the DC area, it can be tough for either of those.
They were pretty.
Yeah, they're pretty. Even the plant itself is kind of worth it if you just want it as ornamental to either the cardoon or the artichoke. And I was thinking also about small fruit trees. So, of course, you can do figs in containers. You can do berry bushes and some of the smaller fruiting trees, like a columnar apple, where it's just one kind of stake to it. Have you ever done any fruits in containers?
I've done some of the dwarf blueberries, and I wasn't terribly successful with them. But one thing that I'm dying to grow is honeyberry. Do you know about honeyberry? Well, I never knew about it until I heard this woman that owns a place called Cross Island Farms up in the Thousand Lakes, and she has this home scale forest garden, and she did a talk on all the things that you could grow up there, at the edge of the forest. And she talked about honeyberry, which has a berry that's kind of like a blueberry, but it's fatter and bigger, and it's hardy to zone 2. I am so buying a couple of them. You have to have at least 2 for cross pollination, but they're not that big. And I love the idea of fruit.
I do too. Yeah, and we're talking about berries, of course, strawberries, classic in a hanging basket. I don't recommend those so-called strawberry containers.
I know.
Have you ever tried those out?
Very unsuccessfully. They dry out and they start looking pathetic, and they don't produce all that well. I don't know who thought up that idea.
Yeah, I think much better to put succulents or something else in them, because usually it's terracotta, it has tons of holes in the sides. But yeah, much better to put strawberries grouped together, like in a trough, like an old window box.
Yeah.
They're pretty shallow rooted, but they can dry out so quickly. It's that those old strawberry pots, they were like used to set up people. I was like, that's not going to be successful. And then I think our last category, Christine, are the root vegetables. Radishes and carrots. You're going to need a little bit deeper container, of course, when you have a root vegetable. Any success with those?
Well, I have to tell you my carrot story. I know we talked about carrots before and you weren't keen on it, but let me tell you what happened for me. I can't grow carrots in the ground. They take 3 weeks to germinate. The soil's never warm enough. I lose them and I just get no good germination. So one day I'm in my friend Robin's garden and I see that she has carrots seeded in these big pots. And I thought, what a great idea. I'm thinking that she did that so that it would be easier to have them germinate. She told me later it was to keep the voles out of them, but I ran with it and I came home and I tried it out in a deep container. And it's perfect because you can keep track of it. I mean, when you've got the pot, you're God, you can control it all. And so the soil is naturally warmer because you've got it in the sun in this container. And so then the plants germinate a little faster than 3 weeks, and you can keep track of it because it's in a pot, keeping it watered and all that. Because, keeping something watered for 3 weeks, man, that's not easy when you're out in the garden. But the pot makes it so much better. And then you're right there and it's under your noses. So when you go out and have a cup of coffee in the morning, you can just thin them out a little bit and then wait for them to do their thing. And they're really good. So long as you use like really good soil with plenty of compost in it, because like when you have a root crop, like the wrong soil can really interfere with the taste. But I don't know. I will never grow carrots any other way. I'm a big aficionado of this particular method.
And so true that they take forever for the seeds to germinate. So you're waiting and waiting on them. And in a container, you might have a little more patience than in the ground before you reseed something else. And I would think as well, what you're saying about the soil competition, the sweeter soil makes tastier carrots.
Yeah, when I mix up my soil, I usually try to find a light, friable mix, but I always add like plenty of mushroom compost to it or regular compost that I have, or something to really beef it up without being too heavy, because they're heavy feeders. And it's really interesting to me. Even other vegetables, if the soil isn't quite right, the flavor of the vegetable really does suffer.
Great advice, Christine. I love that idea of mushroom compost for your carrots. So where can our listeners contact you to find out more?
On my website, uwyh.com, gardeningwithwhatyouhave.com.
Great. We'll put that link in our show notes. And I want to thank you, Christine, for sharing your passion for growing food in containers and for joining us on the GardenDC podcast.
Well, thank you, Kathy. You got me all psyched up. It's kind of a warmer day here, and I just bought a whole lot of potting soil, and I'm going to go out and start planting.
Me too, Christine.
GardenDC will be back after this short break.
In the book The Urban Garden by Kathy Jentz and Terry Spate, you'll find dozens of inspiring and creative ways to grow flowers, shrubs, vegetables, herbs, and other plants in small spaces and with a limited budget. Whether you want to grow on a balcony, rooftop, front stoop, or a tiny urban patio, turn your growing dreams into reality and build a gorgeous and unique garden that showcases your personal style while still being functional and productive. With the genius ideas and resourceful tactics found here, you'll be maximizing yields and beauty from every square inch of your space. No matter what you grow, the 101 amazing growing ideas found in the urban garden will turn your tiny urban yard into a treasure trove of green you'll be proud to share with family and friends. Buy your copy today at your local retail bookseller or order it online now at Amazon.com or bookshop.org.
Deutzia plant profile. Deutzia species are dense mounding shrubs that are covered in white or pinkish flowers on upright panicles in mid-spring. Their thick foliage shades out weeds, acting as their own ground cover layer. They are also known as Japanese snowflower. They are native to Central America and Asia. Deutzia are members of the hydrangea family. There are about 60 species of Deutzia, with many hybrids and cultivars. Depending on the selection, they can be up to 10 feet tall and wide, or have a compact 2 to 3 feet spread. They are hardy to zones 5 to 8. They prefer fertile, moist, and well-draining soils. They become more drought tolerant once established. Plant Deutzia in full morning sun for the best flowering display. They are low maintenance, prune only when necessary every few years, and do so immediately after the flowers have faded. Most Deutzia have insignificant fall colors, except for Yuki Kabuki Deutzia, which was bred by Dr. Tom Ranney at the North Carolina State University. Deutzias are deer resistant. They have no serious insect or disease problems. Butterflies and hummingbirds are attracted to the fragrant flowers. Deutzia is propagated by woody stem cuttings. Deutzia, you can grow that. What's new in the garden this week? Well, my Polish spirit clematis is blooming, along with the Itea and Spirea shrubs. Over at the community garden plot, we're still harvesting asparagus, and I've been adding annual flowers to our little pollinator strip. In garden tips that we shared this week, we talked about tomatoes, including the fact that tomato fruits become cracked when a sudden push of water goes up the stem and then pops open the skin on the ripe fruits. That can be unavoidable when there's a sudden storm, but you can plant crack-resistant varieties and try to water them as evenly as possible. In upcoming local gardening events that you might want to attend, on Sunday, May 17th from 2 to 5 p.m. is the Shepherd Park Garden Tour in Northwest Washington, D.C. This is a self-guided tour. It is rain or shine. You can have a leisurely visit to each garden during the event hours, and the fee for that is $15, and you can go to shepherdpark.org for more information. Next, the U.S. National Arboretum is hosting its annual exhibit, Azalea Bonsai, Putting on the Glitz. This is from May 16th to 1st at the National Bonsai and Penyan Museum from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. daily. And there are trees on display in the outdoor pavilions and indoor exhibit as well. Next, I am speaking for Brookside Gardens virtually online, and the name of that talk is Perfect Fit, Trees and Shrubs for Compact Gardens. Discover the possibilities of planting small trees and large shrubs in compact urban or suburban spaces. This talk is tailored for the Mid-Atlantic. I will share a selection of natives, edibles, and hardy ornamentals that thrive in heat, pollution, and urban stress. The fee for that is $15. You can register for that on the Active Montgomery website or through Montgomery Parks. The date for that is Thursday, May 28th at 7 p.m. Happy gardening!
This is The Last Word by Christy Page at Green Prints with Oh Help Hydrangea, A Plant Addict's Tale by Julie Foley. Yes, I admit it, I'm an addict. I can't seem to get past any plant with a for sale sign on it. Yesterday, I was on my way home from church and needed to stop at the market for a few essentials. How is it that we always need bread, milk, and eggs? It's not like I make French toast every day. Anyway, as I approached the door to the market, there they were, hydrangeas arranged oh so beautifully to entice me. You need me, I could hear them call. No, I thought, no. I have already surpassed my plant budget 2 times over this season. I will not buy another plant. I passed Endless Summer in blue, so lovely. In lace caps in pink, charming. In limelight, such a refreshing green. They tugged at my heart, but I resisted. I entered the store and bought what I needed. Then, as I was returning to my car, I spotted Midnight Salsa. It was as though that hydrangea had a magnet in her flowers. I had to touch her blooms. Before I knew it, she was in my cart and I was paying the ransom at the register. I wondered how I'd explain yet another new plant to Marty. He wants me to be happy, but lately I've been out of control with my plant purchases. I drove into our driveway, stopped long enough to sneak the plant onto the front porch, and then put the car away in the garage. Marty greeted me in the kitchen and reached to put the milk and eggs in the fridge. He's so happy to see groceries come into the house. I love plants. He loves food. As I started to set the table for lunch, Marty passed through the room dressed in his jeans and work shirt. Are you going to tell me where you want that plant, or should I just dig the hole wherever there's a space? He said. Plant? I asked. What plant? You know, the one you just put out on the porch. It's a rose, isn't it? I'll be right out, I called, just as soon as I changed my clothes. I thank God for the blessing of a husband who understands my expensive obsession with plants and all those deer repellent sprays. He may not be able to tell a rose from a hydrangea, but he digs very good planting holes. This has been The Last Word by Christy Page at Green Prince.
Thank you for listening to GardenDC. This episode was made by real humans. It was produced and hosted by myself, Kathy Jentz. The Let the Sunshine music interludes are by James Mulvaney. If you like this episode, you may also enjoy listening to GardenDC Podcast Episode 143, Balcony Food Growing, Episode 116, Miniature Vegetables, Episode 68, Summer Vegetables, Episode 55, Container Gardening Basics. You can become a listener supporter by going to the link in our show notes. Another way to support this podcast is to subscribe to our monthly digital publication, Washington Gardener Magazine. To do so, go to WashingtonGardener.com or WashingtonGardener.blogspot.com. You can find Washington Gardener on Twitter or X, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Pinterest at WDC Gardener, and on Facebook at Washington Gardener Magazine. And be sure to leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast listening app. Please take a moment to share us on social media with hashtag GardenDC and with your gardening friends so other gardeners can find us too. The small favor I have to ask you is to please vote for our show, the GardenDC podcast, at the Best of 2026 WashingtonCityPaper.com website. Find us under Arts and Entertainment, and then go to Best Local Podcaster and put in the GardenDC podcast there. The deadline to vote is June 10th, 2026. Thank you in advance, and happy gardening.